actually doing some tours and talks for about, probably I've been at the farm as a volunteer for about 14 years. Um, what we are actually in is part of the lands of Hillside Farms, which is a non-for-profit group. It's a 412-acre educational facility. All right. This farm originally had about 700 acres, about 412 acres now. This is the summer cottage of the Coyngham family, who were the owners of this from 1881 through 2005. So, like I said, it is a non-for-profit group, and everything that money-wise that is used from tickets or for events and stuff go towards paying our mortgage. Okay. I'd like to read the mission of the farm first of all. The mission is to teach life choices that are healthy, logical, and sustainable. For those born 200 years from now, will have the access to the same or better opportunities or resources. So the farm actually promotes sustainability, healthy living, that type of thing. We recently built a new barn, which is on the opposite side of the road, the same side as the dairy store. That opened in May. You can actually go there to see the milking of the cows in the evenings, okay? So that is open to the public. It is a parlor system where they bring the cows in, milk 8 at a time, that type of thing. We have 55 cows on our farm here, anywhere from linebacks, which is a breed, Holsteins, Jerseys. There's variations of different cows. Give the milk a good taste. So that's part of the reasoning for doing that. Also with the bed pack barn, which we have, it's a very healthy lifestyle for the cattle that are there. On an average dairy farm in the United States, for commercial dairy farm, a cow may be productive for about 6 to 7 years. That's on an average. We have cattle here on our farm 14 years old. So their lifespan is twice as much as probably a normal cow on a dairy farm. Again, the farm was sold by the Coyngham family to the lands of Hillside Farms, which is a nonprofit group, for $4.2 million. We are still paying that mortgage and will be for a number of years in the future here. Okay, get to a little bit of the history of the farm. Basically, what we are in is a summer cottage of William Lord Coyngham, who was of Scottish background, who came to this country from Scotland and came to the United States and lived in New York City for a while, and then eventually moved here in the late 1870s. So how he gained his money is not by farming. He was very interested in farming, but he did not make his money, his fortune, I should say, in farming. He was what they call a coal broker. A coal broker is a person actually that buys and sells coal up and down the East Coast. He sold it. He was in partnership with another gentleman. You probably have not ever heard of him. Maybe you have. Joseph Stickney. Okay. There is a good connection there. I will talk about that later. So he and Joseph Stickney were partners in the coal brokering business. Very profitable. So that's where the Coyngham family made quite a bit of their money. What this is considered is a summer cottage, and then this is a gentleman's estate. Okay, this house was only ever used 2 months of the year. Okay, the rest of the year would have been closed. So in July or August of every year, they would stay here, maybe a little bit later if the weather was good. Their main home was in Wilkes-Barre. Okay, if you're familiar with Wilkes-Barre, there is a Coyngham Hall at the Wilkes University campus. So that was their main home. So they would go back there. It took about 20 people to operate this house. Okay, so when they would come here, they would have 20 people, not all live-in type of workers, but there would be also gardeners. There would be like people for the lawns and that type of thing. But they had, to cook, a waitress, maids, a seamstress. The cook being one of the very most important part of the household, all of them somewhat. Down the end of this hall would have been your servants' quarters. This would have been a children's room on this side. This is a sitting room here. These would have been the master bedrooms on this side. The upstairs, okay, this house was originally only 2 stories. When this was built in 1882, it was 2 stories in size. It actually had another part to it. So if you were looking at this house straight on that side would have been a ballroom. Okay, that was torn down in 1954. When people would come with the Coynghams to stay here, they would actually stay about 2 weeks. So that wasn't uncommon for guests to stay that long. There's 35 rooms, which would have been in this house, 8 to 10 bathrooms, and we have a number of bathrooms. There was no bathroom on the first floor. In those days, it was not uncommon not to have a bathroom on the first floor. You would have all your bathrooms on the second and third floor. So that was put in by the Lands in 2007. So, and some updated electricity, they redid the floors downstairs, that type of thing. So, again, about 35 rooms in the house. There actually is, with the house itself, there was actually two different swimming pools here, okay? The swimming pools would have been, there's one down here at the, across from the dairy store, and there's one actually up here. The one across from the dairy store is the oldest of the two. That would have been built, I don't know exact date on that one, but it stands off the ground. So if you look across from the dairy store, there's a big concrete structure there. And that actually was filled by water from that creek that's down there, and it was heated. Okay, so that was heated by coal. The one up here was built by the Sardoni family in 1935. That actually was heated also, so they're both in-ground pools. Very early, that 1935 one was the first that the Sardoni Construction Company ever built. So that's still there. It was used up until about 6 or 7 years ago. The Cunningham family, like I had said earlier, were William Lord Cunningham, the founder of the farm, was interested in animals, okay, livestock. Again, he did not make his money on that, but he was very interested in it. So he had Holstein cattle, he had milking shorthorns, he had Jerseys, all being different types of milking cows. He had hogs on the farm and Rhode Island red chickens. What people would do is they would come from the area here and actually come in and purchase these animals from them, and they would improve their own stock of animals that they had. So it actually helped the community too. When this farm sold its dairy in 2002, the Cunningham family sold out their dairy herd. Those Holstein cows were from the original farm, which would have been back from 1882. Not the per se cow, but the bloodlines of those cows would have been here for all those years. It was one of the continuously operated, longest operated farms by one family in the country. So from 1881 to 2002, they would have owned the farm and actually had cattle on the farm. So it's a very long time that they actually raised cows here. Okay, if you look up and down Hillside Road here, there's a number of houses, okay? If you go up beyond the dairy store, you'll see a couple houses along the road. They actually were part of what they call tenant houses, okay? So people that would have worked on the farm some of the people would have, that were working with the animals and such, would have lived here. So they actually would have stayed in those homes. So what was done, the Cunningham family would actually supply the coal, the house, and milk for those people. So they had staff members here for a very long time. I know my wife interviewed a gentleman about 10 years ago that worked on this farm for 40 years. Okay, and he said to my wife in that interview that he had thought that he would not ever need another job, and I guess you could say that he didn't, because 40 years is a long time, and he was very happy here. A lot of the people stayed here quite a long time, and that's one example of that. There's greenhouses down by the dairy store. Those greenhouses actually were on the property of the Cunninghams down in Wilkes-Barre. So they were taken apart and brought back up here. Mrs. Cunningham, one of the older Cunninghams, enjoyed lilies, okay, and that type of thing. So they would grow them there. The men of the family were very politically connected. So when you think about it, they're not only interested in the coal brokering, where they made most of their money, farming, and also politically. We actually found a letter here that was sent to the Cunningham family from FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, okay? Personally signed by him. That actually was found here at the farm. So they were very politically connected in the area. Also, the women would work on charitable causes, such as the hospital, Wilkes-Barre General Hospital, and homeless children's organizations. Some people are wondering about the bear that's downstairs. Okay, you see that bear that's there with the paw out. Somebody asked me this yesterday, and I never have gotten this question before. They said, well, was that bear someplace else? And I said, no. She said her family, one of her family members, was a funeral director in the Williamsport area and had a bear very similar to that, with the paw extended. And she wondered if that was the same bear, and I said, I don't think it is. But what it was is that bear was, there's a history behind that. He was brought here actually pretty early on, but the history of him is that Colonel Bruce Ricketts, okay, we all have heard, if you're from the area, Ricketts Glen State Park, okay? Colonel Bruce Ricketts actually was a Civil War veteran, and part of his pay was property that he had gotten from Ricketts Glen, thousands and thousands of acres, okay? So when he moved here, he actually found these two cubs. I'm not sure what happened to the mother or whatever, but he actually adopted the cubs. So he kept them as pets. So there were two different ones, and actually what he did is actually one of those bears passed away. The one was very distraught. So what they did is that, he couldn't survive without the other one. I guess he was lonesome without it. So what he did is actually they euthanized the bear. They actually put it to sleep, and they stuffed the bear. So they were members of Westmoreland Club in Wilkes-Barre. If you're familiar with Wilkes-Barre, Westmoreland Club downtown. So Westmoreland Club at that time was very much into game pieces, like different animals and all of that. So they took the bear down there. And it does have its paw extended. Is there any thoughts on what that might have been for? Does anybody have an idea on that one? I've had one or a couple people tell me what it was, and very few people have been able to say what that was. But that was what they called for calling cards, okay? Back in the day, like a business card is today, you would have a calling card. And you would leave that card in that cup. And then basically, when people would come in and out of the Westmoreland Club, if they needed something, and there would be the person's name, address, and what they did, or what they were offering. So there was an exchange of cards there. So that's what that is. So that's what the paw means on that. People said handshakes, which is a good thought, but there's that's actually what it was used for. So, and then also when we were talking about the dairy itself here, we actually have had a dairy here since 1881. Only a few years have been absent without the dairy cows. But for years, the milk was sold to a co-op, where you actually would sell the milk that you produced on your farm to like a dairyman league. Okay, that was a co-op. So basically, that was done for a long time. So Will Cunningham, one of the last members actually to work on the farm, decided that, well, we're going to make a dairy store. So in 1979, which would have been 40 years ago, the dairy store would have been opened. And that was not uncommon. Okay, in Luzerne County in 1979, there were 8 different dairy stores. Okay, it was not uncommon, but again, they did very well with it, and basically have done pretty good with it. Also when I was talking about Joseph Stickney before, name that probably most people don't know or wouldn't know, but there was a partnership between the Cunninghams and Joseph Stickney. The partnership being, is anybody familiar with the New England here? Okay. There was actually there is a hotel called the Mount Washington Inn, okay, in New Hampshire, okay? So they were partners in that inn, and supposedly I've seen photographs of it. I have not ever been there, but it's a very impressive place, So actually, Mr. Cunningham, William Lord Cunningham, was a silent partner there. So that's the connection between that. Over the years, there's been a couple different, renovations. Again, I was telling you about the third floor. In 1905, there would have been electrical lighting put in. An elevator, which is behind us, Otis Elevator Company, actually put that elevator in. So that would have been done in 1905. Sleeping porches would have been added to the front, okay? So those are kind of the type of things that were improved upon by the Cunninghams. And then when the Lands took over, they actually redid the first floor somewhat. On this banister going upstairs, you'll see the artwork on there. I had a gentleman here several years ago, and you look at that and say, well, that was probably done, took some time. But he said that took a lot of time, because you got to remember in the 1870s and 1880s when this was built, that was all done by hand, okay? They brought craftsmen in from over in Europe to do that. So it was definitely, took some time to do it. Well, we do appreciate you coming to the Lands of Farm, and we do, thank you for your patronage here. And, enjoy yourselves and tour this floor, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.